The 2024 Champions Showdown Chess 9LX kicked off today with the first 3 rounds of rapid Chess 960 action. The tournament is a 10-player rapid round robin featuring none other than the legendary 13th classical world chess champion Garry Kasparov, along with 9 of the top players from the United States, fighting for a total prize fund of $150,000. Going into the results of day 1, Fabiano Caruana grabbed the early lead with a perfect 3 out of 3 start as he defeated Oparin, Shankland, and Nakamura in consecutive games. Currently tied for second are Hikaru, Wesley and the reigning champion Sevian, all on 2 out of 3, while Kasparov ended up scoring an even 1.5 out of 3 during the first day. Jumping into some of the games, we'll start with the first round between Caruana and Oparin. Time control here is 20 minutes with a 10-second increment. And as we mentioned, this was a Chess 9LX Chess 960 event, meaning all of the pieces on the first row are rearranged for the starting position. If you're new to this game, all of the rules are still exactly the same as in normal chess. All the pieces still move the same. Everything functions exactly the same way. The only difference is the starting position of the pieces. But when you castle, for example, the king still ends up on the appropriate square if you're going queen side or king side. So that's kind of like the major difference. And we'll see some interesting castling later today. So game 1, white goes d4, black goes d5. The opening is always super interesting in 960 because obviously the players, they're only given 15 minutes before the start of the round to analyze the position. They can't use engines, so they're mostly just figuring it out on their own at the board. And this first game here between Caruana and Oparin, they get a pretty reasonable position. As we'll see later on, this starts to resemble some kind of a stonewall type of situation with black playing d5 and f5 as we get this kind of familiar structure. This one was actually balanced for some time. Oparin definitely holding his own, although falling a little bit behind on the clock, but having very nice knight on e4 here in this position as he goes c5 and starts generating counterplay on the c-file. But eventually he goes wrong here under a minute. As he plays this move knight to c3, things get very tricky for black because now white goes bishop to f3, just defending the e2 pawn in case of any tactics. Bishop a6, knight e5, and now rook to c2 as Caruana prepares to double on the c-file, and actually this knight on c3 ends up becoming a target. So Oparin bails out with knight to e4, but now white trades on c7, goes rook to c1, and captures the c-file. And this ends up being decisive for Caruana. So he goes rook to c6, queen d5, gives a check to take the 7th rank as well. Now rook to d7, hitting the queen. Oparin tries f4 as his queen actually is out of squares here. And after queen to c3, he's forced to resign because black's queen is trapped, simply no moves. White is winning the queen for the rook, and it's game over. Moving on to another round 1 game, this one between Dominguez against Kasparov. Same starting position, but this one actually, Kasparov manages to overtake the initiative as black, as Dominguez goes for the setup with f3 and bishop to g2. Engines don't seem to really like it very much. In fact, they're already preferring black's position around here, as his setup seems to be a little bit more harmonious. Anyways, we see rook c8, rook d8, white pushes e4, but now takes an f5. Kasparov strikes back in the center and gets a lot of activity using this queen and bishop battery on the diagonal. Now Dominguez plays d5, opening up his own battery, but it turns out black just has more play here after f takes e4. If white were to recapture this pawn with knight takes e4, then bishop takes d5 likely would come, and once again white has issues on the diagonal. So bishop to h3 hitting the e-pawn, now bishop takes d5, c4. The game gets very messy, but eventually Kasparov manages to get a very nice advantage here as he takes on d3, white takes on d5, and now knight to f5, and black ends up with some extra pawns here as Dominguez keeps his light squared bishop on the board, but at the cost of some material. Now bishop c5, he tries b4, black trades off the other bishop, and now fantastic move here from black, c5, with the intention, I believe, to meet d takes c6 with rook takes c6, offering the exchange sacrifice, threatening rook to c2 check, and basically just giving black a completely decisive initiative against white's very open king. So Dominguez goes back, king to g1, but now e takes d5, and these pawns end up being just way, way too strong for black. Even though white has the two bishops, black's knights kind of control everything. Now the c pawn locks in with c4. There's queen h6 here, knight takes f5, and after queen c6 and d4, queen b7, Kasparov trades queens here, goes rook to c5, and Dominguez resigned here as black's 3 pass pawns in the center of the board. White has no compensation for these pawns. They're simply going to promote, and white will have to lose a bunch of material for them. So Kasparov actually started off with a win in the tournament. He then lost the second round to Wesley. So in round 3, he went up against Robson. This game was very, very complicated. But at this moment here, after black's last move, rook to f1, black definitely seems to be doing well here as his pieces are extremely active. White's king on b1 seems vulnerable. But here Kasparov finds a brilliant way out with just 1 minute on his clock. He goes rook takes d5, sacrificing the exchange. After c takes d5, he then plays knight a5, threatening mate on b7. But his idea is the ingenious point to meet rook takes d1, not with taking back the rook, because then white is just down the exchange and losing, but instead to play king a2. So just giving the second rook by pointing out to black that actually he has no great way of defending b7. It actually isn't true. Black has a couple of moves here. He can go b5, but after b5, white plays a takes b5, and then b takes a6 to follow, and white has enough counterplay here for at least a draw. Robson found the other way to defend it, which is actually much more solid. He goes rook a1 check, giving back one of his extra rooks, king takes a1, queen h1 check, king a2, and then d4. So fantastic resourcefulness just to find this backwards defense where the queen covers b7. He's still up the exchange, but unfortunately for him, after queen to b6, white does have enough here for the perpetual, as queen c7 check is the threat, followed by king a7, queen to c5, and black's king can't get out of perpetual check. So that's what ended up happening, is both players have 20 seconds here, d takes c3, and Kasparov gave the perpetual check, and the players soon agreed to a draw. So fantastic combination here, definitely showing like the incredible tactical complications you often get in 960, this weird pawn on d6, like when does this ever happen in normal chess? By the way, black did have a way out here after knight a5 to get the advantage. Instead of taking the rook with check, where white goes king to a2, so instead of taking quote-unquote free rook, black could have played the move b5 here. And then if white takes on b5, the point would be that he has queen to d3 check using the pin. And after white moves the king, queen takes d1 apparently wins for black, as white isn't in time because the queen on b3 is hanging, black is turning mate with queen to a1, and here black's extra material should win the game. Of course, on b5, white doesn't have to take. White can try the very, very tricky move king to a2, looking to take on b5 next. But Engine is saying rook ff2 here, and then if a takes b5, there's going to be rook takes b2, and we end up in this position with black having a queen against a rook and knight. So very, very good winning chances here for black, but of course the game would continue for some time. So super cool combination there, allowing Kasparov to end his day on an even 1.5 out of 3. Going back to round 2, this is Caruana's second game of the tournament, this one against Shankland. And here opening starts off pretty reasonably, both players going f4, f5, and g3, g6, a type of Leningrad Dutch setup, which makes a lot of sense with the bishops in the corner in 960. Now knight to b3, d6, knight f3, d3, c5. And here Shankland goes for e4, which is definitely a very, very risky decision, as Caruana grabs the pawn on e4, queen h3 check, bishop d7, white wins back the pawn. But then after bishop f5, black just gets way too much activity here. So white goes knight to d2, but now knight to f6, white loses time with the queen, and now knight to b6, black's pieces start coming out here very, very actively. So knight to g5, queen to g8, eyeing that a2 pawn, which turns out to be hanging, a3. But now knight to g4, bishop to d4, black's pieces just start coming in here. Bishop check, bishop d2, and now d5. Very, very nice move from Caruana, as he simply advances his d-pawn, fighting for this diagonal, as well as looking to open up the rook on d8. And of course, this knight on e4 doesn't have a lot of great squares. So white takes on e3, knight takes e3, takes the pawn on c5, sacrificing the exchange. but now king takes d1, knight to c4, and it's a very, very messy position, but black is up the exchange here, and white's king is pretty open. So objectively, black is doing very, very well. Game continues here, e4, f5. Shankland just looking to open lines, trying to get some counterplay against the black king. But then there's a very nice moment in this game after rook f8, b3, knight drops back, queen h8, queen to d6. Check out this move from Caruana. Castles. Castles. Queen to d6. Turns out you could castle here because the rook is the only piece that's quote-unquote moving through check. The king actually isn't crossing any attacked squares. It just gets to stay on c8. The rook hops over, and yeah, perfectly legal move. No arbiters were called at this point, and a great move because black connects the rooks and gets a tempo on white's queen. Queen e7, bishop d7, knight e6, queen takes h2, black's queen comes in, rook g2, queen takes h1, and Shankland resigned as he's just down too much material and doesn't have any attack. Queen c5 check, bishop to c6, and yeah, black is just up way too much stuff here. So that set up a very, very critical round 3 game between Caruana and Hikaru Nakamura, who's also on a perfect 2 out of 2 score, having defeated Wesley and Levon Aronian. So huge matchup here in round 3. Once again, they get a fresh position for each round. So this one started off like so, with white's queen on e1. So Caruana goes e4 here and f3, quickly getting the knight out of the corner. And this opening actually seemingly went very, very well for white here, as he advances his a-pawn early on. Bishop a2, bishop a6, but now d5, d6, and c4. And at this point, white is already having a huge, huge strategic advantage here, as he's simply gaining too much space in the position. So bishop c7, b4, and Hikaru tries to strike back here with b5, but yeah, white has many, many good options here. Fabi takes on b6 en passant, now bishop to b3, and he starts putting a lot of pressure on black along the a file. So knight c3, and now very nice maneuver, rook f2, trades rooks, brings the other rook over to the a file as well, and now knight to a7, followed by b5, just a fantastic concept here to bring the knight to the incredible outpost on c6. And at this point, black just has no counterplay, very, very little space in the position, and white just needs to break through. He goes g3, looking to open squares on the king side as well. Now knight to f2. Bishop starts swinging around. Eventually, Hikaru takes on c6, but this allows white's b-pawn to become a monster. Now Caruana plays g4 to close things up on the king side and looks to break through on the queen side. So knight comes around here, knight c3, and Hikaru tries to just give up a pawn just to get some squares, but knight b5 and rook a7 were coming anyway. So basically just hopeless position for black, and Caruana is able to convert quite nicely. h4 now breaking on this side of the board, and yeah, black's pieces are just too tangled up here in order to defend. Now h5, fixing a second protected passer in the position, and here white just needs to infiltrate on the queen side here, and after knight a7, ends up winning a whole piece here. Queen comes in, knight swings around to b5, and at this point Hikaru had enough and resigned. So huge win for Caruana as he starts off with a perfect 3 out of 3 after the first day. So that takes us into tomorrow's day 2, where we'll have the next 3 rounds of rapid action, 9 rounds total. Coming up next is going to be the 4th round, where Caruana will be playing black against Levon Aronian. So should be another very, very exciting day ahead of us, and hopefully I'll see you back here for the recap. All right, folks, until next time, take care.